Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. Today I thought I would hit you guys with the classic 10 things I wish I knew before playing Wizard101. Now this is a discussion video. You can leave in the comments things that you wish you knew as well, and then obviously newer players, you may learn something, or maybe even older players could learn something. So without further ado, let's get into it. The 10 things I wish I knew before I played Wizard101. Now, the first thing is something that I think most people will be warned about within the first few minutes of playing the game, but it's something that's really important to know, and that is the cost of this game. This game runs based on a subscription service. It's not simply you buy it and you can play it forever. It's not like most modern games. You pay 60 bucks, boom, you got it forever. How Wizard101 works is it works based on a membership service. So what membership will get you is you can play the areas that are locked behind the paywall. Now, the most important thing, and the reason why I'm mentioning this at all, is that the paywall in this game is very close to the beginning. You can get maybe an hour or two of playtime and content without a membership, and definitely I wish that I'd known that when I first started playing, because I definitely spent probably hours just wandering around Triton Avenue killing random enemies and stuff, and definitely it's a bit of a bummer not knowing that, you know, you're gonna have to pay $10 a month for the foreseeable future. Now, I will say, I actually don't mind the $10 a month in a lot of cases, because it's a case of, okay, I can pay $10 and get hundreds of hours of content this month if I want to, or I can choose not to. I do like that in that regard, but I will say the paywall is very close to the beginning of the game, and it definitely leaves a few things to be desired. You can only get to level 7 out of 150 without a membership. So that kind of puts into perspective how much of the game you're getting. Purely from level scale, you're getting maybe like 3% of the game or less, and that's not even counting the fact that the quests get exponentially more as worlds go on, so you're not even getting that much. The next one is actually what school to pick. Now this one obviously is completely subjective and is completely up to you, but definitely it would have been nice when I first started playing to know more about the schools. The create a wizard option doesn't really give you much to go on. When you look at it, they don't really say much. They just say kind of like almost a personality traits, and then they list like famous people who were, you know, fire wizards, ice wizards, so on and so forth. And that gives you almost no basis on what that school is going to be, which is really disappointing, because I definitely didn't know the differences between each school as a kid and didn't know what to focus on. The first school I ever picked was fire, and it's not because I was like, okay, I want to be a heavy hitter or I want to do damage over times. It was because I was like, haha, fire's funny, fire's cool, you know, that kind of thing. I was like, wow, fire spells, awesome. And that is a real problem, I think. Obviously, I have some videos I can link in the description of my guides on what school to pick, but definitely it's important to know what school to focus on and the strengths and weaknesses of each school before actually playing the game, because I think it can be really disappointing when you pick ice expecting to be like a badass ice mage and all you are is a very tanky thing that doesn't even get a blade until level 38. Definitely can be a bit disappointing. The next is something that may seem a bit obvious, but is definitely not for a new player unless you played a lot of games like this possibly in the past. And that is what stat to focus on. Now, I've made a video on this before. I've made a video on all of these topics before, but when I was a kid, I didn't know what stat to focus on, and I didn't know how to focus on stats. And I think this is true for a lot of newer players. Newer players won't understand what stats to focus on and might be a bit, you know, overwhelmed. As a kid, I can tell you I focused on one stat. You know what that stat was? Health. I'm a fire. I was a fire and I was focusing on health. I had a lot of health, and I would always buy the gear that had the most health from the bazaar. And beyond that, I didn't farm for any gear until Waterworks, and I didn't even farm for that until I was in my 70s or 80s in terms of level. This game doesn't do a very good job of guiding you on what stats to focus on, and definitely what stats you should pay attention to, which obviously I've made a video on, but to sum it up, basically, damage is incredibly important, resist is incredibly important, and then accuracy and power pip kind of just come naturally over time that you can focus on. Pierce is also good as well. And while I'm not saying that you shouldn't focus on health, specifically at certain more defensive schools, that shouldn't be the main stat you're focusing on. Like, I had probably only like 30 damage up until level 70, which really shows just how bad of a job I was doing at focusing on what proper stat. It definitely was why I struggled a bit in the beginning, because I didn't know the differences. On top of that, they didn't do a very good job in the very beginning telling you the difference between flat damage and base damage. If you didn't know, there is a percent damage, which is the stat you should be focusing on. Like, obviously I have 166% damage, but in the beginning there's a lot of gears that give the flat damage, and I remember seeing the flat damage was higher than the percent damage in the later gears and being like, I should wear these gears. And I definitely wore like level 5 gear right up until like level 20-30 when the percents started getting higher than the flat damage. And it's really a mess. You should definitely know what stats to focus on, and that's something I wish the game would teach you a bit more, because the game really doesn't teach you about stats. Obviously, you can go to the help page and get help on some of this stuff, but really it doesn't do a good job of telling you what to focus on. The next thing is something I am a big proponent of, and I have been for a very long time, and that is proper deck setup, because this game really doesn't teach you about decks. In fact, I think it teaches you to do the opposite of what you should do. It really emphasizes the fact that you have these new spells and that you should put it in your spell deck, and it says that with a lot of new spells when you train them, but really it's important to know that not every new spell is going to be perfect and usable. There are so many spells that I would never put in my deck, like Steel Charm. Realistically, that's almost never going to come in handy. Take Power, sacrifice a minion, that's not going to come in handy. Detonate is only going to be handy at like later levels. Realistically, a lot of these spells are not very useful. Like, dispels are very situational, and as a kid I put all of the maximum of these in my deck, and that is not the way to go. Like, I don't know if something specific said put the maximum amount of every spell you learn in your deck, but definitely that is what most people's first reaction is to do, and that is not the first reaction to do. I keep my spell decks very small. Now, obviously you can make them a little bit bigger than this. I think my limit would be like 4 rows of cards, and even that is a bit cluttered. And obviously PvP is a whole different story in of itself, but for PvE and the actual game content, you really don't want to overload your deck, because you will spend more time discarding spells and passing than actually preparing and using spells that are useful. And that is a real problem, especially to a beginner, and it's definitely the reason why I lost a lot of fights as a kid, because I was just spending most of my time discarding random useless spells instead of actually using spells that would be beneficial to me. The next tip is something that I really wish I'd known as a kid, and definitely is super useful to know, and that is that you don't need to do every side quest. In fact, most side quests are not worth doing. I will say, I am a larger proponent of side quests than most people. Most people say just ignore side quests completely. I definitely recommend doing some side quests, especially in the earlier levels. But should you do every one of them? No. And the best example of this, if you look on this death here that I created when I was like very young, I accepted so many quests, like so many quests. Here you can see I have 10 hidden quests. These are all side quests I accepted that I don't want to do, and I probably would never do to clear my quest log. Now I will say, you may be like, Noah, 10 quests is nothing. This character had over 30 side quests that I'd accepted and not done on it a little bit ago. I'd started doing them to remove them from my quest log until they eventually added this really handy feature called hidden quests, which means I can actually hide my quests and not have them all show up here. But the gist of it is you don't need to do every side quest. Yes, there are some that you should do. There are ones that give a lot of XP and maybe get you a higher level are useful to do. Side quests that give you gear sets such as Mount Olympus, Tartarus, Waterworks, Darkmoor, all of those are very useful to do, but do you need to do all of them? No. This is a mistake I wish I'd known as a kid. Like, I don't need all of these side quests, and I know some of them are easier to finish. Like, I could finish like these Z quests a lot easier and these book quests a lot easier than normal, but it's just a lot of time that I really don't want to spend wasting on these random side quests that aren't even useful to do. Like, at this level, a lot of these side quests are completely useless to me, and that is a little bit sad. Next up is going to be what to spend gold on, because I think as a newer player, you you have really no idea what to spend gold on. And there's so many things that are super vital that you get done early and earlier in the game that you wouldn't spend gold on naturally because you don't really know. The first thing, and this is probably the most important thing to do, if you don't have a mount, you can actually buy mounts for gold. You can see here some of these at the bottom, 50,000 gold you can spend, really cheap. You can get this probably by Mushu or Dragonspire. You could buy a full permanent mount. This is definitely one of the first purchases you want to make on a new account, especially if you don't want to waste money on crowns. Another thing is pets and pet training. Now, obviously, this is a lot of gold, and I'll continue this on later on like where to get gold and stuff like that, but you definitely want to train up a pet as soon as possible. And I know it can be very rough. The hatching kiosk costs like 100,000 gold a piece. It's really bad sometimes, and that's not even counting the fact that buying pet snacks like Shanta puddings in the bazaar costs even more. But using your gold to train up that pet is super important. Even if you only get like one dealer talent at first, like get like a 9% dealer, that's still super useful to have on a pet, like very much important to have. That extra 10% damage really will mean a lot in your stats, especially early game. So if you can get a pet as soon as possible, it's definitely important to do so. Now, before I go on to the next topic, and actually another thing to spend gold on, one thing you shouldn't spend gold on, and I know that this is very tempting, and as a kid, I definitely did this a lot. It may be tempting to buy a house for gold, but trust me when I say in the beginning, it is not important to buy a house for gold, especially like at an earlier level when you could be using it to train up pets and buy mounts and stuff like that. That is really important for you. It is vital that you don't waste your gold on some of these houses. Now, yes, at a later level you can, like once you unlock the best place to gold farm and once you actually start getting to the later levels where you're maxing out your gold, of course you can spend it on a house, but at an earlier level, it's not useful. So please don't waste your gold on that. The next thing, and another thing to spend your gold on at a lower level, and this is super useful to do, is to come here to the house raider, go to this woman, visit castle, top rated, scroll down, go to top dorms. Now, the reason why you're doing this is you want to go to the Arcanum apartment. And the reason why you want to do this is you want to immediately leave and go get what I think is one of the most useful things to have at a low level. This is probably one of the biggest things and has saved me so many times at a lower level, and that is TC Monstrous. Now, if you don't know, you can come here to Librarian Fitzhume, and for 250 a piece, you can buy Monstrous. Now, obviously, at a lower level, if you only had, say, 20,000 gold, you could only buy 80, but that's enough to make it through quite a few battles. Basically, if you didn't know, TC Monstrous adds 175 damage to your spell, and no, you don't need to be level 50 to use them. I know it says 50 here, but that isn't the case. You can use them at a lower level. You put them in your treasure card deck, and then use them to enchant a spell. You want to enchant a spell, and then hit with it. It does a lot more damage, and especially at that lower level, it can even double the damage of your cards and make Firecat worth using in, say, Marleybone. I would say to get through the earlier game, right up until you can train Monstrous, you need about 200 or so Monstrous, 300 maybe. So that gives you kind of an idea of how much you need. You can see that costs, if I wanted 300, that costs 70,000 gold, which actually isn't that hard to get. I know it does seem daunting at first, but you can probably get that in Dragonspire or Celestia, realistically. For the next tip, I want to actually go over what to spend crowns on. Now, I'm not going to go super in depth with this. I'm sure there's many videos you can look up on what should I spend my crowns on, but the big gist of it is, please don't waste your crowns on random packs. Look up what's in the pack first, look up what's useful for you to get, and then maybe buy it. Like, for example, there is really no reason for a lower level, or most people at all, to buy like a Knight's Lore pack. Unless you're going for Deer Knight, which I definitely recommend crafting, there's no reason to go for this. The Immortals Lore pack, the Nimbari Horde pack, a lot of these really don't have a reason to buy them. Really, it's just important to know what you're going for. If you want like an educated thing, like Professor's Horde pack is almost always useful. The boots are extremely good for every single wizard, and the Dworgen's hat is good to get potentially if you're going to spend crowns on something. Do I recommend it? No, not necessarily. A lot of times spending crowns can be incredibly useless and incredibly pointless and just a waste of money. But if you're gonna buy something, at least know what you're buying, because as a kid, I spent probably $50 plus, and I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but as a kid, that's a lot, on like Dragon's Horde packs, which literally had nothing in them and are incredibly stupid to buy. I've bought mounts in the past for full crowns, and you can see a lot of these, like, you need to spend like $25 on this mount. So it's really important to know what to spend crowns on. Please never buy gold for crowns. It's never worth buying gold for crowns. These clothing bundles, most of them are entirely useless. The only reason why you'd want to buy one is for the stitch, but otherwise, like, they are super useless to get. And I'll go further in depth in this later, but please don't buy mega snack packs. I've said this before, and I'll probably say it again at some point, but the most bought pack in the crown shop is the mega snack pack, and it is not worth it to buy ever. So please don't buy the mega snack pack despite what you may think is useful. Next up is where to farm gold, and I'm sure a lot of longtime players know and love this method, but it's something that newer players definitely need to learn. If you are earlier game and you're actually looking for a place to farm, the best place in the game is definitely Vesterland with this one boss. Now you obviously need to do Winter Tusk first, which you can unlock at level 40. So if you're level 40, which is a pretty early level in the game, you can unlock Winter Tusk and quest through it. Be warned, it is a hard world, but once you get here, you can come to Halfang's cave and fight Halfang. Halfang is a boss that has 1800 health, really weak. His minion has 1300. Realistically, even at an earlier level, your 4-pip AoE enchanted is going to do enough to actually kill him in 1 or 2 hits. So really easy to farm, and he drops something called the Cow's Pearl Amulet. This sells at the bazaar for 8,000 to 9,000 gold, so do keep that in mind and keep this in the back of your head as a place to farm. You can definitely get like 100,000 gold in maybe 15 minutes, especially at a later level when you're blitzing through these. Like once you get to level 60, you can definitely finish these in 1 to 2 minutes per run, and you can get a lot of gold really fast. And the final thing that I wish I'd known, and this is something that definitely would have been really helpful to know as a kid, is gardening. Gardening is super useful. I know it may not seem it as a kid, and as a kid you may be like, ew, gardening, that's boring. But gardening is so useful, especially if you know what to garden. You can see right here, I'm gardening evil magma peas, and I'm gardening like 13 of them right now, 16 of them, something like that. And you can get something like a couch potato, which is basically the same as an evil magma pea, decently early in even Grizzleheim, and it's really important to garden those because they drop mega snacks. And this is one of the reasons why I said don't buy the mega snack pack earlier. There is no reason to, and the reason not to is simply gardening. You can get 1 mega snack from each of these plants really easily. Now, I've made a beginner's guide on farming, and obviously a lot of people have made better guides on farming in the past, so look those up if you want to know exactly how to garden. But the gist of it is that you want to take care of these plants because once you harvest them, you can get that mega snack. If I look at it just like logistically, I'm getting 2 mega snack packs. I'm getting more than 2 mega snack packs because the mega snack packs give tier 8 mega snacks and not tier 9. I'm getting 2 mega snack packs a week because I do harvest these in about half a week to a week. I'm getting anywhere from 2 to 4 mega snack packs per week, which is $10 to $20 a week that I'm just saving from mega snack packs on gardening. If I had known and done this as a kid, I would have probably thousands of mega snacks at this point, especially if I knew what to farm, because as a kid I definitely sold some evil magma peas and couch potatoes not knowing what they are. So definitely try to start gardening as early as possible. But that's really it for today. I know that this video was a bit longer, but hopefully as a beginner you learned something, or even later on you learned something that could be useful for you. I know some of these are common knowledge, but you know, some of them aren't as common knowledge and aren't as focused on, especially for more casual or newer players. Also, comment below something that you wish you'd known when you first started that could potentially help some newer players. But that's it. Thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next video. Adios.